Hi folks, I'm Michael's clone, and if you watch the video about living with yourself, you'll get that. But welcome to my world, and we're talking about Freddy Krueger, and we're gonna tear it up. We're gonna make a tier list because that's trending on YouTube, so let's take advantage of it. So let's tear it up. The reason I chose Freddy Krueger is obvious. It's around Halloween. Halloween's a few days away. So it makes sense to do a tier list on a horror movie villain. But I have a connection to only one horror movie villain, and that's Freddy Krueger. When I was young, probably about 8, 9, 10, that area, I blazed through all of the Freddy Krueger movies, except for Freddy vs. Jason and the remake. Probably when I shouldn't have been watching those movies, but my dad's a big horror buff. He loves vampire movies, and he had all the Freddy Krueger movies, and I watched them all. I watched, Nightmare on Elm Street, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, Freddys Dead, and Wes Craven's A New Nightmare. And so I have an affinity for these movies. They're placed in nostalgia in my heart. I didn't rewatch any of these movies before making this tier list because I just wanted that nostalgia intact. And I got some notes here, so you see me looking down, that's what I'm looking at. So we're gonna start off with the original movie, Nightmare on Elm Street, which came out in 1984. And if you don't know, Freddy Krueger is a demon that haunts teenagers in this town, teenagers of the people who killed him because he was a child molester and a murderer. And so now he's haunting the children, the teenagers, in their dreams. And it's got Heather Langenkamp and Johnny Depp, and I think like his first movie role ever. And yeah, it is a terrifying movie. Yeah, the special effects don't really hold up. Some of the makeup is a little weird on Robert Englund, but this movie basically started, of course it started, he was creepy. He still had some jokes. He was still corny. There's some scenes where he's like cutting off his fingers and laughing and stuff. Freddy basically in this movie is the embodiment of all the fears teenagers have. The fear of becoming an adult, the fear of growing up. While there isn't the over-the-top humor of the later movies, it's still really great. And Wes Craven has a knack for just like directing horror movies. And yeah, Robert Englund is just great, and he gets even better as it goes on. So if I'm gonna put it on the list, I'm gonna put it, it's probably A tier. It's not the best because the effects have degraded a lot. Everything's practical, there's no special effects in this. So I'm gonna put it at A just for that. It's still great. I highly recommend it. You should watch it. Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddys Revenge. So this one, when I watched it as a kid, I was highly confused. To me, in retrospect, having not seen it since I was a kid and just thinking about it in my brain, I thought it was a very homophobic movie. It took place in the 80s when there was the AIDS epidemic and the AIDS panic. I viewed it through that lens for a long time until recently I read an article. Apparently it's like a gay cult classic. All this homoerotic subtext now is being celebrated, whereas before I just assumed it was homophobic. There's a lot of innuendo. It's not subtext anymore. I guarantee if I watch this back now, I'd be like, whoa, this movie is all about a guy dealing with his sexuality. And Freddy is like his moment of coming out of the closet. There's this crazy scene in the middle of the movie where Freddy comes out of Jesse's body, and then he just like murders a bunch of teenagers. So it's a very interesting movie. If I was putting it on a list, I'm gonna put it about C tier. Freddy is still horrifying, but he's got a little bit humor in this one, but the cinematography in this one I remember being really great, but the story is a little weird. But hey, it's a cult classic now apparently, and maybe it'll find new life, and maybe people will come to appreciate it more, and maybe I will do a rewatch and it'll move up in my tier list, who knows. A Nightmare on Elm Street, Dream Warriors. Now I loved this one as a kid because it was basically a group of kids coming together and teaming up in the dream world and fighting Freddy. And that was awesome to me as a kid. And I watched this one probably about 5 times. They start to do more of the inventive death scenes. So for example, Freddy uses a guy's veins, he like pulls them out and like does them as a marionette, and it was just like, as a kid I was like, wow, that's like crazy to think the special effects like even as a kid, like 9 and 10, I started to become aware of like the behind the scenes of filmmaking and stuff. I watched like a feature thing about Jurassic Park and what it went to like make those dinosaurs. So I was attuned and aware of like special effects, and I was like, wow, how did they do that? How did the behind the scenes team make that marionette with his veins? And I was like, that's really cool. And also Freddy now is becoming more of a pop culture sensation. Like from 3 to 6 is when he's like mainstream. I would have to put Dream Warriors at about a B. A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. Freddy goes all in on hamming it up. He is just a comedic guy. It's still kind of horror, but it's more horror comedy now. It's sort of shifting over. I don't really remember a lot beyond the death scenes in this one, but I do know that the Dream Warriors are killed off, and that made me very sad as a kid. But he does put on some sunglasses and laughs maniacally at a beach in one of the dream scenes, and it's funny, and it's not great, but I would probably put it at a C, right next to Freddys Revenge. One of those movies where, like, maybe I'll appreciate it if I rewatch it, but when I watched it as a kid, I was not that impressed. A Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. I had no idea what was going on. It was too absurd and too surreal for me to really understand. But the one thing I do remember is that Freddy was feeding a child in utero. He was feeding a child in a woman's womb dead souls to get it to become like Freddy. That's all I remember. Freddy is his Freddyist here, and he's really fun to watch. He's just all over the place. So if I'm putting it on the list, it's probably going to be a D. Freddy's still cool, but I had no idea what was going on. Freddys Dead, The Final Nightmare. It's the first one of the 90s, and it's terrible. There's no horror element to this at all. When I watched it as a kid, I had a ball. I had a blast. It was hilarious. It was bad, but it was hilarious. There's a Breckin Meyer's in there, and he has like a video game death sequence. Freddy has his own little power glove, Nintendo power glove. It's just dumb. It's just dumb and bad, but in like the best kind of way. But I'm still gonna put it at the E level. It's not F, it's not D, it's E. Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Wes Craven's first dip of his toe into the meta commentary on movie making and horror movies. And this sort of set up the stage for Scream. This one was really loved by critics, but kind of panned by the horror fans, but not me. So when this was one of the first movies I sort of watched in the Freddy series. I think the first one I watched was probably Dream Warriors, and then I worked through Dream Master, and then Dream Child, and then I watched New Nightmare. And New Nightmare blew me away as a kid. It was horrifying. It got what Freddy is. It got that tone of the first one while still having some humor. There is some humor, but not a lot. And it made Freddy creepy again. And I really enjoyed that about it. And the meta commentary about movie making and like why people are so interested in horror movies is interesting. And then Nancy comes back, Heather Langenkamp, and she has to embody her role of Nancy. Out of all of them, I think it's the best. So it's gonna go up S tier. It's the S tier. And it's all alone by itself, and it's amazing. Freddy vs. Jason, which came out almost 20 years after the original. And this one's a ball. This one gets everything. This is like fan service 101. It got everything right about Jason. It got everything right about Freddy. Yeah, it's kind of lackluster a little bit, and like, you know, it's like routine sort of like horror trope setup. But once you get to the Freddy vs. Jason part, that's where it gets really fun. It's like slapstick comedy. It's like Abbott and Costello type humor. And it's really fun to see Freddy try to manipulate Jason and then them have their fight, both in the dream world and the real world. And the music is just like butt rock music, and it's hilarious. I loved it when I first watched it, and I still love it now, and I've watched it a few times. Also, Freddy turns into a demon worm and gets high with the pothead of the movie, and that's ridiculous, and that like holds true to the original Freddy series, where he does sort of these like bizarre things for no reason just because he wants to mess with a teenager. And it's really funny, and I'm gonna have to put it in the A tier, right next to the original. Freddy vs. Jason is like fun, hilarious. A Nightmare on Elm Street from 1984 is more like creepy vibe horror stuff about like growing up as a teenager and like dealing with these consequences. A Nightmare on Elm Street, the 2010 remake with Jackie Earle Haley and Rooney Mara. And it sucks. It's terrible. I hate it. Don't want to talk about it. it's in the F tier. It's bad. It removes all the fun of Freddy while at the same time not improving upon the original premise. Like, if they removed the fun and made it creepy like New Nightmare did or the original did, I'd be okay with it. But they didn't. They removed the fun, they removed the creepiness, and it's just a bland, boring movie. Maybe when my daughter is old enough and if she appreciates horror movies, maybe I'll binge right through them again. When she's old enough. I'm not going to make her watch when she's like 8 or 9 like when I did. Maybe like 14 or 15. I think she'll be able to understand it. Well, if she likes horror movies. She's probably going to hate them. She's probably going to hate everything I love, so, you know, it's going to happen. That's going to happen. We just got to deal with it. She's going to hate wrestling. She's going to hate horror movies. She's going to hate Blade, and, you know, if she hates Blade, I'm going to have to kick her out, you know? But anyways, if you like this video, hit subscribe, hit like, all that stuff. But if you want to see me do more tier lists, I'll do them. Just tell me the stuff, and I'll do tier lists. If I got to watch movies, I'll do it. That's it. Thanks. Bye. Welcome to my world. I suck.